These teams don't love each other.
They don't like us. We don't like them. You know how that goes.
Divisional matchup, kind of too. It's going to be a physical football game.
You get a feeling this is one everybody has circled on their calendars when the schedule gets released.
Whenever you have two good teams, you're going to be trading blows. May the best man win.
How are the fans?
Can I pass?
Winston, there he goes. Going deep, down the field. Intercepted.
I knew he was going there. I knew it.
End zone touchdown, Kada.
Goes football. It's caught. Touchdown, Tampa Bay. Rashawn White fire the cannons.
Winston is sacked. He is sacked. Winston is decked. And another sack for Tampa Bay.
For the end zone. Got a receiver in the area. And Evans makes the catch. Touchdown, Tampa Bay.
It's over the middle. Godwin, touchdown, Bucs.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. We are live on YouTube today following the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Week 3 26-9 victory over the New Orleans Saints. I'm so excited that I said it was Week 3. This is actually a Week 4 game, and the Bucs are 3-1 headed into the bye week. What a great feeling. The first time in franchise history, in the storied, almost 50-year history of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they have not beaten the New Orleans Saints 3 times in a row in regular season competition. Well, after sweeping them with Tom Brady in 2022, they come out with Baker Mayfield Week 4 of 2023, and they get the job done in a hostile environment on the road and had to overcome some early mistakes, but a damn fine performance from our Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How are you feeling, Evan?
Yeah, it was a pretty complete game, I think. Obviously, there's some things that we'll talk about that not everything was perfect, but it's not going to be. It's far from perfect every game. But yeah, I mean, I thought they played both offense and defense. I thought this was probably the best game by both sides. If you want me honest, like I just felt like the offense did what they had to do. There was a little bit of a lull there, which we've seen in the past few games, but like it didn't last long. They made plays when they needed to, so that mattered. Because the Saints got it down to 1 score, and the Bucs were able to respond. They were able to respond with points. So I think that was a critical moment. And then obviously, yeah, the defense being able to hold the Saints out of the end zone, what was really impressive as well.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of surprises in the game today. Let's talk about the first one that we heard about this morning. The Saints had the option to take a busted-up Derek Carr as their starting quarterback today or a fully healthy Jameis Winston, and they chose Derek Carr. And I got to say, I don't know what the Saints' game plan was coming into this game, but I can tell you, first and foremost, it didn't seem like there was an ample effort from them to drive the ball down the field. I thought the Bucs defense did a pretty good job of just shutting them down. I mean, for the first time in almost 10 years, I was watching this game, and I cannot remember the last time I have seen the Bucs out-mental New Orleans, mentally demoralize the Saints. I mean, the level of effort from some of those players being highlighted in the second half for New Orleans was not good for them. But for the Bucs, I mean, that's a victory in more ways than one when not only can you go out there and win the game in dominant fashion, but you can just completely shut down a team in their home stadium. I mean, the Saints were being booed off of the field by their own fans at halftime.
Yeah, and I'm not going to, obviously, yeah, we were wrong on our predictions. I will say, and I even said this to you before we got on here, if I had known that it was going to be Derek Carr, I honestly probably would have picked the Bucs to win. I just didn't think Carr was in sort of any shape to play. And when it was announced on Sunday morning that yeah, he's going to start, I was like, oh, I think the Bucs are probably going to win, just because I didn't know what type of offense was New Orleans going to have, and how would that limit it? And yeah, Carr his shoulder wasn't completely busted. I mean, he threw a couple of deep balls, but you could tell it was limited. There was a limited offense. There was a few balls that he skipped, and I think it hurt New Orleans. So a questionable decision by New Orleans, but regardless, that's their choice, and the Buccaneers had to deal with it either way. They could have, sat back and ended up losing this game, but they took it to him. And what was the pressure there all the time? No, you would have liked to see a little bit more pressure against an offensive line that's struggling, but they made the plays when it counted. They got off the field on 3rd down, and they got a few turnovers there too.
Yeah, and we did get a quick appearance by Jameis, 1 of 1 himself, 1 pass attempt, 1 interception, And that was all she wrote for New Orleans. So let's get into this game, and let's talk about the Buccaneers on offense today, what they were able to do well. Moving the football is one of them. 353 total yards for the Bucs, 239 of those through the air, 114 rushing yards. Let's talk about the run game, and let's highlight the running backs. Rachaad White and Keyshawn Vaughn, the two who got the majority of the carries. But believe it or not, there is someone who finished with more yards on the ground than Keyshawn Vaughn. That was the quarterback, Baker Mayfield, who had 31 yards on 8 carries. So Rachaad White, 56 yards on 15 carries, 3.7 yards a tote. Baker Mayfield, 31 yards on 8 carries, averaging 3.9. And Keyshawn Vaughn, your boy Sneak, on 9 carries, gave us 16 yards, 1.8 yards per carry. Devin Tompkins also had a first down and 11 yards on an end around, which counts as a rush attempt. So I will say, I think Dave Canales, we do have to give him some credit for how creative he got with the offense this week. This is what I saw today, the changes that were made, even in the first half, the way that this offense looked, changes were made. Adjustments were made after a pretty horrid play calling venture last week on Monday night. Dave Canales went back in the lab and he drew some things up this week. And while I don't think the run game is quite at the level where we still want it to be, and I know people are going to give us hell for saying that, the run game still doesn't feel like it's where we want it to be, right? Because the Bucs don't have 100+ yards on the ground today without Baker Mayfield tucking and running as much as he does. But I will say, there were times where it felt like the run game helped dictate this game for Tampa Bay, helped them control the clock, and you got a couple of crucial first downs. I mean, through the first 3 games of the season for the Bucs, they only had 3 runs on the ground. I'm sorry, 4 runs on the ground for 10+ yards. In the first half of today's game, they had 3 of those. So while there were areas I think the run game was improved, play calling being one of them, while it wasn't awesome, it definitely was enough to help them win the game. But what were your thoughts on Rachaad White's performance today?
Yeah, I thought, just like you said, I think you sort of said it best. Was it great? No. Was it even good? I don't know, but was it enough? Yeah. And like, right now, with how you've seen this run game this season, I think you take that. And it was much, much improved from last week. Obviously, I know it's a different defensive line they're going up against, but the Saints, they still do have a solid defense. Like, that's how they win a lot of their games. Like that streak or whatever that the Bucs ended up snapping of 11 straight games holding opponents under 20 points. That doesn't happen by accident. You don't hold opponents 11 straight games under 20 points by not being a solid defense. So it was an encouraging sign. Now, I mean, some of the numbers are a little bit skewed. The Bucs towards the end were trying to run out some clock. You run it in some obvious situations. The Saints are going to stop that. But like I said, I was pretty encouraged. We'll see. Hopefully they're going to be able to, use the bye week to regroup and figure some more things out. Hopefully the run game can get going because it just helps the offense so much.
What did you think of the play calling this week? I already talked about Dave Canales going back to the drawing board and trying to bring in some new wrinkles to this offense, and he surely did that. I mean, there was some stuff today that we saw. We saw Chris Godwin drop back and throw a pass, Like, there were a couple of things that we simply have not seen before. Like, I'm not easily impressed as far as creativity on offense. Like, Devin Tompkins on a jet sweep, we've seen that before, right? Like, we've seen a couple of guys over these last few years in Tampa Bay get, some carries on a jet sweep, but we saw some pop passes. Again, we saw Chris Godwin go back for a throw. There was some trickery up their sleeve, and I definitely think it caught New Orleans reeling early in that game. And again, that's another reason why it felt like by halftime, the Bucs had all the momentum in their favor, even though it was barely a 2-score game.
Yeah, it was interesting, some of the plays, especially the Chris Godwin one. I mean, that one, we've seen pop passes and stuff and end arounds from time to time, but I'd never seen that one before, especially with Chris Godwin. Never always seen that type of thing. And I mean, they have, obviously it didn't work, but like, it's fun to try, and it's something different. So yeah, they definitely brought out all the stops this week. There was on more than one occasion, and you always want to be careful when you put that stuff on film. Like, now it's on film. So like now defensive coordinators are going to be able to watch that and recognize, okay, when they're in this formation, they like to do this. So you got to pick and choose your spots of when you do those things, which is why you don't see NFL teams doing it constantly, because it's meant to catch, just like you said, to catch a defense off guard. And I think it did that to New Orleans, even though like the Godwin throw didn't work or anything, but there was a few, like the pop passes were but like the end around of Devin Tompkins, like you said, gained 11 yards. There was a few other plays that I thought were pretty good. And the creativity I thought was much better this week. There was a few probably I would say decisions in the first half, particularly on the 3rd and 1 early in the game when they didn't get it on the 3rd and 1 there. I thought actually Keyshawn Vaughn, it looked like he did get it, but I guess he didn't. It was interesting to me that they decided to give Vaughn some carries. That I do wonder if they sort of, maybe I'm not like, I don't really want to speculate, but maybe like they're sort of out a little bit on Sean Tucker. Like they're down on him a little bit because like they didn't use Sean Tucker at all. Like it was Keyshawn Vaughn and Rachaad White. So, I thought it was much more creative, and I'm curious to see how how many more times you can do that, because you can only do it so many times. So it was fun to see some tricks up their sleeve, though.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the run game coming up on opportune moments for Tampa Bay today. While anything in the box score isn't going to blow you away, Rachaad White, 3.7 yards per carry, Keyshawn Vaughn, 1.8 yards per carry, your two feature backs for today. I do think the offensive line did a better job of opening up some of those run lanes. Some of the miscues that we saw from Rachaad White, kind of the same things that we have seen, that being too patient behind the line of scrimmage, not just hitting the hole and running downhill. We saw Keyshawn Vaughn come into the game and do that a few times to effect for Tampa Bay. So shout out to the offensive line. As far as Baker Mayfield, 25 for 32, 246 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, and of course that 1 interception at the end of the first half there. So could have been a costly turnover, but luckily the Bucs defense comes up big, and they can kind of wipe that one off of the board and pretend it didn't happen, because it ends up in 7 points for the Buccaneers. Let's talk about your leading receivers for the day. Chris Godwin, 8 receptions, 114 yards. It's crazy that we talked about on the game preview show, Mike Evans be the motor for this Bucs offense so far. Like, a lot of their big plays, a lot of their success that they've had early on in the season has come from Mike Evans just being available and making plays. But he goes down in this game. 3 targets, 3 catches, 40 yards for Big Mike against Marshawn Lattimore. He tried his best to go out there, came out early after halftime, tried to warm up on the sidelines, and the Bucs end up ruling him out. So here we are begging the question, what does this Bucs offense look like without Mike Evans on the field? And this isn't, this New Orleans Saints defense is no pushover. They are pretty damn good. Like, it's the same core that we have talked about for years on end now, and how they've consistently given the Bucs issues, especially under head coach Dennis Allen. They had no answer for Chris Godwin out there today. He played like a man possessed. Devin Tompkins had 4 catches, 45 yards, and that incredible Superman catch in the end zone for a touchdown late in the game. Chris Godwin, despite 114 yards, could not find the end zone, but that's all right. Cade Otton found the end zone on a shovel pass from Baker Mayfield early in the game, and big play Trey Palmer, 2 catches, 6 yards, one of those coming down for 6 points. So this pass game without Mike Evans, their effectiveness against a good defense, and honestly, some pretty good decision-making from Baker Mayfield down the stretch. I thought, realistically, this is probably the best this passing offense has looked all season.
Is it a coincidence that you just said that, and it just so happens to be Chris Godwin's best game all year? Like, like we talked about that on the preview show. We talked about that after last week's game. Like, I felt like getting Godwin going was a key to unlocking this offense, and they did that. And obviously, he needed to do that, especially with Mike Evans out. Like, Chris Godwin became the number 1 option there, and he needed to step up with Mike Evans out for an entire half. It wasn't just like he was out for a little bit of the game, out for the entire half of football. So, Godwin stepped up big time, and like I said, it was much needed at a much needed time for the Bucs, because if Godwin was sort of doing what he was doing the first few weeks, and his usage and everything was like similar to how it was the first 3 games. I don't know if the Buccaneers win this game. I just don't know if they have enough offense. But Godwin was exactly what the Bucs needed for him, from him on Sunday, and really encouraging to see. And hopefully, it's the start of things to come for Chris Godwin, because that was like the Godwin that you're used to seeing, right? Like, it's like maybe not every time getting over 100 yards and this and that, but like the big time catch, right, over the that one defender. Then he had the 32-yard catch. Like, you've seen that from time to time with Chris Godwin, and that's what Bucs fans are used to seeing. So it was nice to finally get that for the first time this season.
Yeah, and just a quick update on wide receiver Mike Evans. According to Bucs head coach Todd Bowles, he does not have an update for the time being, other than that Mike tweaked his hamstring. And we know that hamstring injuries have been kind of an issue with Mike Evans in the past, so obviously we hope with the bye week coming up, he does get that extra little bit of rest, and he'll be ready to go for Week 6 against the Detroit Lions. Bucs going to be back at home for that game. But man, oh man, 3-1 headed into the bye week is definitely not where you or I had this team. I don't think it's where the national media had this team. And I know the Bucs
we actually both had them, I believe, the exact opposite. I believe we both had them 1-3.
If anybody is 1-3 at this point in the season, it is you and I picking this Bucs team so far this season. So listen, I will take that every single day of the week. If I pick the Bucs to go 0-16 and they go 16-0, I'm not going to be upset in the slightest. Like, it does not bother me. I am okay being wrong about my prediction for the Bucs. That's A-okay. A win is a win, and 3-1 is a damn good spot to be in. Now, before we talk about the defense, who I think were potentially the bigger heroes today, Antoine Winfield Jr. playing out of his mind. We'll talk. Hold on. Let's not jump into that prematurely here. But penalties definitely were an issue. I thought there were way more penalties in this game than the Bucs were probably comfortable with. Todd Bowles even said it himself. There was way too much penalties going on, and it's something that you're going to have to clean up. Now, it's not very professional to blame the officials, so I'm not going to. But I do not think it is a coincidence that Sean Hockley officiated this game and the Bucs play one of their sloppiest games of the year. I thought some of those calls in the first half and the first quarter were pretty tic-tac, but that was indicative of the kind of game it was going to be. But I also think, those penalties coming on early in the game the way that they did, I thought it was pretty impressive for Tampa Bay to just overcome that and continue to play. Like, this kind of looked like early on the Saints were the first team on the board. And it looked like early on that this was potentially going to be a game where the Bucs had to kind of beat themselves, and you didn't want it to start snowballing, right? You got those first few penalties, you get set back, and you're like, all right, let's just hope they can stay composed. No fights, right? Let's hope there's no fights. Yeah. Nobody gets thrown out or ejected from the game. And you didn't see any of that. And kind of like what I said at the beginning of the show, you ultimately saw the Bucs win the mental battle against New Orleans, and I cannot tell you the last time that has happened. I don't think that has ever happened in the history of this podcast. And like we said last week, we've been doing this for 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, the only other time you could say is probably the playoff game, right? Like, I think that's the only other time where, like, you felt like the Bucs had that mentality. Like, yeah, they're just better, And, it's because the scary thing is about the penalties early is that's been the thing with New Orleans for the Buccaneers, right? It's whatever can go wrong against New Orleans will go wrong for the Bucs, no matter what team they have, no matter who's on their roster, no matter where the game's played, doesn't matter, right? And it was nice to see them sort of not let the penalties kill them. There was a few calls I didn't agree with. I believe Eddie Nash in the chat mentions the holding call on Izzian. Didn't think it was a hold. And there's always going to be calls, though, right? There's always going to be calls that you agree with, don't agree with. So I'm not going to harp on it too much. But, yeah, you got to get them cleaned up. I mean, against the better team, just like we were talking about with the Bears and the Vikings and all these other teams, against a better team, like that amount of penalties is going to really, really hurt you, and it hurt you a little bit today, but it didn't come back to burn you in the end. Against a team like Buffalo, it could hurt you. Against a team like Detroit, like I think Detroit's a better team than New Orleans. Like you can't do that again. So it's definitely something I think is probably going to be a pretty big talking point in the bye week to just clean up those penalties.
What a sentence. Detroit is better than New Orleans this year.
Yeah,
I don't know about that take. But I am with you. I am very happy with the win today because we talked about how, the level of competition between the teams that the Bucs have beat and the teams that they have lost to this year being the Eagles. The Eagles are the cream of the crop. They are the benchmark for the NFC and what a lot of these teams want to do on both sides of the ball. In the trenches, with the offensive firepower, their defense is playing well, even though they're playing overtime against Washington right now, which may be the outlier game of their season. They're still one of the best teams in the NFC. New Orleans, I had higher expectations for them. I still do. I still think they're going to be a team that's going to give the Bucs problems down the stretch as far as competing for the NFC South, because while the Bucs do hang on to first place, it's going to come up again here in a few weeks with a divisional game against the Falcons. So with that being said, the Saints are a good team. The Saints are head and shoulders better than the Bears. They're better than the Vikings. I'm confident.
It's close.
I'm confident in saying that the Saints are better than both of those teams. I am.
Saints defense is better than the Vikings defense. Vikings offense better than the Saints offense.
Sure. I mean, with a busted up Derek Carr, I think there's a lot of offenses that are more capable than what New Orleans.
I think even with a healthy Derek Carr, they weren't that good through the first 3 weeks of the season. They weren't that good even before Carr went down. It wasn't like they were firing on all cylinders, So they've struggled on offense, and there's a reason. They held 11 straight opponents to under 20 points. All right, why they not win more games then? Because their offense isn't good enough. That's a reason why. So, it was definitely nice though to see. Like I said, just a full effort by both sides of the ball, and New Orleans, and especially you're going into New Orleans, that's not an easy game. That is not an easy game to play on a short week as well.
Yeah.
Play on Monday night, going into New Orleans on Sunday. That is not an easy game to go in there and win. And not only win, but really not just win by 2 points. You won by a wide margin.
Friendly reminder, phones are on today, 305-224-1968, the number to call. The meeting ID on your screen for this week, 824-0062-2096. Give us a call. Let's talk some Bucs. But in the meantime, let's talk about the other side of the football and highlight some players who were definitely firing on all cylinders today. Antoine Winfield Jr. staking his claim as the best safety in the NFL. I don't want to hear otherwise, because over the first 3-4 weeks of football, there has not been a safety better. There just hasn't been. You show me the film, you name someone who's been better than Antoine Winfield Jr.
No, I mean,
at the safety position over the first 4 weeks of football. I do not see it.
That's a different sentence. Antoine Winfield playing the best, okay. Antoine Winfield the best, those are two different things.
Let's see what our first caller of the day thinks. We got someone joining us from the 813 on the Cannon Fire podcast. What's your name?
Jeremy. What's up, fellas? How y'all doing?
Jeremy, what's up, dude? How you feeling?
Feeling great, man. 3-1. We just smacked our division rival. I love it, man. Like I said, where's Peter King at with his little prediction winning 2 or 3 games?
Yeah, I think the Bucs headed into the bye week 3-1 is quite the statement, considering, the loss against the Eagles. We talked about it. Nobody's going to give them too much slack for that. But, I think beating New Orleans, especially beating New Orleans the way that they did, they didn't squeak by. They controlled the entire game, basically 3.5 quarters they had the lead and did not give it back. So what are your thoughts on this Bucs team headed into the bye week?
Gives our guys time to rest, gives Mike time to rest his hamstring, gives time for these other injured players that have been hurt, like Jamel Dean, Elijah Cansey. And that's the scary part. I mean, Cansey has not played all year. Wait till we get a healthy Elijah Cansey with that pass rush, which makes me even more excited. I mean, props to the defense, getting up to Derek Carr, shutting down the run. I mean, only surrendering 3 field goals and no touchdowns today. I mean, hats off to Todd Bowles in the defense. I got to give them a lot of credit. They really surprised me a lot today. I had a feeling we were going to win, but the way they did it, they played like a football team. Baker looked great. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to go to the Super Bowl here, but we sure as hell damn got a good shot at making the playoffs and maybe make somewhat of a run. I mean, this defense is so underrated in so many ways. And when you lose to a team like Philly, hey, NFC champions for a reason. Like I said, at the end of the day, we're only in week 4, fellas, but hey, 3-1 for the bye.
Hey, I like it. I was just talking about how 3-1 headed into the bye week feels like a statement. It feels like they're playing ahead of schedule. Like obviously there's some things that still need to be ironed out, but for where I was expecting this team to be 4 weeks into the season, with a new quarterback, new offensive system, rookie play caller, we knew this defense was going to be good, and we knew they were going to help the Bucs win some games. But just the progress that we have seen, even on the offensive side of the ball, from week 1, week 2, week 3, they took their lumps, and this week was the first week we got to see Dave Canales learn from his mistakes, and he did that. I think he went out there, he did that, and he showed us that he is a coordinator who can adjust week to week in the NFL, because that's what the best coordinators have to do. You have to learn from your mistakes, and you got to clean it up, and I'm glad that he put them in a really good position to win. Jeremy, any last thoughts before we let you go, my friend?
And that's another thing you mentioned about Dave Canales. I mean, the dude's creative. I mean, I saw plays today I haven't seen at the Bucs in forever. I mean, the Godwin play kind of scared me. If you would have had a better, more accurate arm, I think that play would have worked. But, like you said, Canales adjusted, and he performed really, really well. I feel like, Canales will get better and better as the season goes on. And, hey, division leaders, man, go Bucs.
You got to love it. Go Bucs. Thank you for calling in, Jeremy. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
Take care, buddy.
So 3-1 record for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers headed into the bye week. Jeremy, our first caller of the show. Friendly reminder, phones are on 305-224-1968. We'll be taking your calls for the rest of the show. Evan, what are your thoughts, before we deep dive into the defense here, what are your thoughts on, I guess, just where we are right now? The Bucs potentially playing ahead of schedule. Do you feel like this is a team that can continue to improve from this point forward? Do you think they are a team that, week 6, we both picked them to lose to the Lions? I don't know if that prediction is going to change once we make it on the game preview show next week, but are they a team that maybe has you feeling better about their chances, against a team like the Lions after the bye?
I mean, it's still going to be tough. I mean, that's going to depend a lot on health, right? Like, is Mike Evans healthy? Is Jamel Dean healthy? Like, it's going to be tough, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout. Like, are the Buccaneers going to win? I don't know. It's 2 weeks away, it's not even next week. So that's tough to say. One thing I did want to say about Antoine Winfield, though, is I do think, now I don't think he's the best safety in the NFL. I still think that's probably Minka Fitzpatrick at this point. But I will say, I think this was Antoine Winfield.
Hold on.
Well, he's better.
What was the final score? I'm sorry. What was the final score of the game today between the Houston Texans?
What does that matter?
What was the final score? The
Texans just beat the Jaguars. The Texans are like 3-1 or whatever.
I don't want to hear it.
What does that matter?
I don't want to hear it. I will respectfully disagree with that take.
Okay. That's fine. Now, I will say, I think this was Antoine Winfield. In my opinion, this was his best game of his career. Yeah. I thought he was just fantastic in all aspects of the game. I thought he was just really, really good. And, with being shorthanded in the secondary, they needed him. And not only that, Ryan Neal goes out with a concussion very quickly in the game. So they needed a guy in that secondary to step up, and Winfield, especially on that deep ball, just fantastic. Fantastic coverage by Antoine Winfield there. Couldn't have played it any better. Literally could not have played that deep ball any better. That's a touchdown, and he's able to get a arm in there. So great coverage. I thought he was just fantastic today.
We got our next caller on the show from the 562. What's your name? Where are you calling in from?
Hey, what's going on, fellas? This is John here, known as Buckwild.
John, what's up, dude?
What's going on, fellas? I'm out here in Hawaii, man. I couldn't watch the game, but I was on Mr. Bucks Nation. You know how it is as the mod squad. So holding it down, but I appreciate you guys, man. Everything that you guys do today, man. I woke up late, but then saw that we were 14-3. Man, everything the sun rose real quick. But I was really excited how everything was going as far as just listening in, but wasn't too quite sure how our offense went in the first half. I know Mike Evans was out for some reason, and I was hoping that he stayed in and just dominate and just put in some extra yardage and stuff. But if he's hurt, it's a good thing that, our guys are banged up right at the moment that they're going into bye week. and I love it. So I just appreciate you guys, man. Fire the cannon.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for calling in, buddy. We appreciate you as well. Shout out to the Mod Squad, Bucs Nation, Willie Beeman, G
Aloha.
Vegas, some of you other guys holding it down. We appreciate
Yeah,
you.
yeah, he's over there in Hawaii, man, repping.
Any final thoughts before we let you go, my friend?
No, I appreciate it, man. Like I said, man, go Bucs, 3-1. I'm just looking at for this season just to win the division. That's all I'm hoping for. Win the division, that's it.
I like it. I like it. For the Bucs, feeling pretty good at 3-1 right now. 1-0 in the division with a firm hold on first place in the NFC South. Thank you again, Bucs Nation. We'll talk to you soon, pal.
Cool. Bye. See you guys later.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about the defense that I think needs to be improved is there still was a lack of 4-man pass rush today, and even sometimes when they blitz, like these guys they're not winning their one-on-one battles, and like the worry is that the Saints coming into this game, talking about that Q&A that I did on Bucs Nation with the Saints guy from the SB Nation site, and he said like the offensive line was a real weakness for the Saints this year. Normally it's been a strength, and it wasn't really that big of a weakness today. I mean, the Bucs did not get a lot of pressure. Now there was some times when Derek Carr got the ball too quick, or Taysom Hill got the ball quick, or whatever, but there was just times where Carr sat back there and just had all day, and against better offenses, that's not going to fly. Like these guys, Shaq Barrett and Vita Vea, he's playing, with that pec. He's not 100% healthy, but Shaq Barrett, Joe Tryon-Schwinka, Anthony Nelson, like these guys are going to have to start winning these one-on-one battles when they get them.
Yeah, there were a few times today where I was just shouting at my TV that he had far too much time. And while the Bucs did come up with 3 sacks today, it felt like all 3 of them were kind of coverage sacks, just taking way too long in the pocket, nothing downfield, kind of has to fall down with it, and it is a sack for Tampa Bay. But I will agree, the turnover late in the game obviously was a huge turning point, and the fumble recovery deep in enemy territory at the end of the first half was another huge turning point. But you take away the Jameis Winston interception at the end of the game, it didn't feel like there were any pressures on the quarterback being Derek Carr that made a significant difference in this game. All of those sacks, I think one of them was on 3rd down, so it got him off of the field, but none of them felt like it was a huge moment in this game to look at as a turning point. Now, as far as the time of possession goes as well, there wasn't that big of a discrepancy. The Bucs did win the time of possession battle, but 31 minutes and 11 seconds to New Orleans, 28 minutes and 49 seconds. Both teams had a pretty equal shot at this thing. I mean, you take away the possession the Bucs had at the end of the game, both teams pretty much have the ball for around 30 minutes. So for what the Bucs were able to do, the way that they controlled the game, you can't say that they controlled the clock like they did in the first 2 games of the season, but when they had the ball, they did a pretty good job of hanging on to it, moving the ball downfield. And I think this was probably their best game on offense so far up until this point of the season. But let's talk a little bit more about some of these players on the defensive side of the ball. We talked about Antoine Winfield Jr., the best safety in the NFL, playing one of his best career games today. Christian Izien, also second on the team in tackles, 4 tackles, 2 assists, no turnovers for him. But I think Christian Izien, especially with Jamel Dean being out and then Ryan Neal going out early in this game, Christian Izien has been a bright spot for the Bucs so far as an undrafted free agent, a guy that nobody thought was good enough to draft. Todd Bowles said he was shocked that he was still available. I think Christian Izien has been one of the best undrafted free agents on the team so far. Like he's pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say one of. I would say he's probably the best, like far and away the best undrafted free agent that they've had on the team. Just a solid player, like just a really solid player, and it was a good find by Jason Light. Like that's what you need. When you're trying to fill holes and don't have a lot of money to do it, you're going to need some of these guys to step up. And the nickel spot was a real question mark for this team, like a serious question mark. And right now, Christian Izien is providing all the right answers. So, he's been pretty good for them. I mean, already 2 interceptions, and he's a pretty short tackler. There is sometimes he'll miss a tackle, but a lot of the times, like, he's a pretty solid tackler, which if especially corners when in run support, that's very important. So, yeah, I mean, he's been a really good player for them, and hopefully, he keeps it up for the rest of the year.
Speaking of run support, today the Bucs had not their toughest test on the ground so far, but it definitely seemed like the game plan for New Orleans was definitely run heavy. 37 pass attempts for Derek Carr, which is actually kind of insane when you think about it. He goes 23 for 37, only 127 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Taysom Hill threw one pass for 13 yards. That was a first down completion of Michael Thomas. And then Jameis Winston, one pass attempt, one interception.
I will say that the people that were like, when I said earlier, like when I saw Carr was in, I thought they had a better shot to win. Like, and everybody's like, "Oh, Winston only had one pass and one interception." You realize the situation that game's in at that point? Like, that's not an indicator on how that game would have gone. And me and you both sat here on the preview show and said countless times we are operating under the assumption that Jameis Winston is the starter because we didn't think Derek Carr was going to play. Didn't practice really at all that week, and like we didn't think he was going to play, and we both picked him to lose. Like, it's okay, but like I don't know to bring up that point. Oh, he threw one pass, one pick. It's a completely different situation.
Hello, who's this? You're on the Cannon Fire podcast.
Hey, how you guys doing? This is Corey from Nashville.
Corey, what's up, man? How you feeling?
Well, I don't know how I feel. Like, that was. Hey, wait, is this PT or can I curse on it?
No, you can cuss. Go ahead.
That was so fucking dominant. Like, I don't even know how to respond to it, guys. Like, we were so dominant. We looked so, and this is, so I've been a Bucs fan. This is my 21st, what's it, 2023? This is my 22nd season, right? And I seen a culture change in us once we got Brady, where we went out to the field these last 3 seasons and we expected to win certain games. Now that Brady is gone, that mentality has permeated this locker room. And I've been trying to explain to people, get fucking Caleb Williams out of my Buccaneers jersey. We're not going to suck hard enough at all to get Caleb Williams. Guys, our core players are winners. Tristan Wirfs is a winner. Antoine Winfield Jr., winner. Devin White had one bad season, losing season as a team his rookie year, came back, Super Bowl. Jamel Dean, Super Bowl. Our core, Vita Vea, our core good young players only know the Buccaneers as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, NFC South dominant team and a Super Bowl champion team. You guys, like, I'm trying to explain it to people and they're not understanding. Yes, I've been a fan for 20 plus years, so I've been around for the Buccaneers, for the younger Buccaneers. I've been around for all that BS, for the disciplined high school football, disciplined Shiano, I don't know what that fiasco was, Buccaneers. I've been around for that. But, guys, this is not that anymore. This is a team that expects to win when they take the field. And today, to me, showed, and I wasn't a big Baker fan. I'm sorry, I'm on this diatribe. But I was a big Baker fan for obvious reasons, like 95% of the NFL. But once they say he got the job, I've been all in on Baker. All in. And my tweets back that up. And I was like, you know what, man? This locker room is not going to allow Baker to be the Baker that we know. It's just not. Mike Evans goes down early, and Chris Godwin, who everybody knows in the NFL as a 1B receiver, had to play 1A, and he was fucking dominant. That's the word. He was dominant as the number one today. I'm so happy with this team. I said I would take 100 Eagles losses on Monday Night Football if I got one dominant Saints win. And the Buccaneers proved to me why I've been a fan for 22 years.
There was a lot of mental toughness behind the win today for Tampa Bay, and I do think that's a great point that you brought up, because when we talk about the Bucs versus Saints in recent years, you know, last year the Bucs got the upper hand. They swept New Orleans, and I think that did the job. Like, I think that got the Saints out of this Bucs team's head, because for the longest time, we talked about this matchup, and we not only talked about the players on the field, but we talked about the mental implications and how for the longest time, the Saints were that one team, the one team on the schedule who could get into the head of pretty much the entire roster. And if the Bucs were down early in the first quarter, it didn't feel like they were going to come back and win this game, but they had to overcome a lot today. I mean, not only did they have to go on the road into a hostile environment, NFC South game, division implications on the line, but that first touchdown to Cade Otton, They tried to take out Baker Mayfield. Nobody can tell me anything differently. Cam Jordan knew what the hell he was doing when he rolled him up, and then that no-name defensive lineman who had to come in with a late hit against Baker, they knew what the hell they were doing. The Bucs came back. Baker didn't leave the game. Fucking goes out and throws 2 more touchdowns. Mike Evans leaving the game early. You talked about Chris Godwin having to be the guy, having to step up. Chris Godwin has been that guy for the Bucs before, but I don't think he's been in that situation against New Orleans. And he went out there and he dominated them today, just like he has in any other game he plays against the Saints. I thought there was a lot of mental toughness shown on this Buccaneers team today. And like you said, that's a mentality thing. I think between sweeping New Orleans last year and just having a locker room culture filled with winners, like that goes a long way. And I like that you brought that up because I definitely think that was a factor in today's game.
I'm very going into the bye week being 3-1, and granted, no, it's not moral victories or anything like that. But guys, and I said this after we lost to the Eagles, like if you guys we watched that game, man, that's a defending NFC champion. And for the most part of that game, guys, we went toe-to-toe with that team. Now, injuries happen. We came into that game banged up, and I think they took a toll. They obviously took a toll because that's a pick 6 for Devin White. Let's be honest. That's a pick 6. And but we went toe-to-toe with that team. We made the Eagles sweat. I know what the final score was. We all know what the final score was. But we made that team sweat, and I think we proved that, hey, we can play in December and January. And I think today was the ice cream on the cake or the whipping on the – I don't care. I don't even know what it is. But, guys, I'm so enamored by how we won today. Like you said, I'm not used to having a mentally tough Buccaneers team. And a lot of that – and I hate it because I love James. I cannot believe he came in and threw that pick. There was a guy who tweeted. He said James came in and said, "F for the Buccaneer down there somewhere."
My favorite thing to hear from that was Chris Myers. Shout out to our guy Chris Myers, by the way. I'm glad he got to call the game today because he is a Tampa guy. He is a Bucs fan. But the first thing out of his mouth after Jameis threw that pick was, "Well, Bucs fans have seen this before." That was the best.
That was a great impersonation. My God, that was awesome.
Corey, thank you so much for calling in, dude. It's been a pleasure talking to you. You got me ready to run through a brick wall right now.
Man, I'm about to. If my son went in the car, I would have already went through one.
Hey, well, drive safe, buddy. Go Bucs.
Yes, sir.
That was awesome. Best call of the day.
And, he really, I think he hit the nail on the head when he said the difference, right, of pre-Brady versus post-Brady is that expectation to win, right? You go into every game with the expectation that you're going to win. Are you going to win every game? No, you're not. But, there's a mentality there, right? There's a mentality that's got to be built in basically by winning football games. And he's 100% right. The guys that were drafted here, the core, the Devin White, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, Tristan Wirfs, Anton Winfield Jr. Anton Winfield Jr. and Tristan Wirfs have not missed the playoffs in their careers. They haven't missed the playoffs. They don't know they don't know what that's like to clean out your locker in the first week of January and be done. Right? They have no idea what it's like to have, is the coach going to get fired? Is the GM going to get fired? They have no idea what that's like. And that's because the team has put this culture in and they're homegrown guys, right? They had the important veterans there that you need, right, to supplement your homegrown guys. Jason Pierre-Paul, Ndamukong Suh, obviously Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski. They had those important veterans there, but also they picked the right guys. And that core, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, Devin White, Tristan Wirfs, Anton Winfield Jr. A little bit Chris Godwin. But all those guys know, those guys don't know the Bucs from the down days, they don't know that. They don't know any better. Mike Evans, Mike Evans had a lot of losing to put up with. He had to put up with a lot of losing, and literally 3 different head coaches. His 3rd different head coach was the one that finally, he was able to get to the playoffs and win a Super Bowl with. So I think he hit the nail right on the head where it's a culture thing, but it's from that homegrown. These guys are growing, right, together in that locker room, and they're building something. They're now they're trying to kind of rebuild, not completely rebuild. They're trying to kind of rebuild because let's face it, this team isn't going to win a Super Bowl this year, but that's not what this year's about. Like, this year isn't about hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. It's not a failure if you don't do that, but it's about keeping that culture. If you were 1-3 or 0-4 right now, there'd be questions of, now that Brady's gone, are you going to go back to what it was like before him? And as it turns out, it's probably not. And that's a good sign.
Yeah. That core group of players that you talked about, that young core, was the major selling point for everybody defending the Bucs headed into this season. Peter King is picking the Bucs to win 2 games this year. ESPN has the Bucs winning 1 game this year. Like, there were multiple national media outlets who had the Bucs pegged as the worst team in the NFL, if not the second worst team in the NFL. And everyone who has watched this team for more than a season, for more than just the Tom Brady era, is like, listen, we still got playmakers here. We got playmakers here, playmakers here. And those guys have been producing since the start of the season. I know Vita Vea, even with a pec injury this week popping up on the injury report, finished with 2 sacks on the day. Like, there was a lot of good to be said about these young core players that the Buccaneers have. And a lot of these guys entering, the prime of their careers, like Tristan Wirfs, Antoine Winfield Jr., still maybe a couple of years away from really hitting their stride and being right in that, what would be considered their prime period.
I think they're probably entering it like now.
Sure,
probably. But
like Devin White, for example, this is the year for him, right? I mean, not only is he playing for a contract, but he's right at that 4th season. So, this is that period where you expect him season 5, excuse me. This is right at that period where you expect him to start playing the best football he's played in his career. And while today he wasn't a game wrecker, he didn't have to be because everyone else made plays. And this Buccaneers defense, I don't think there's enough that can be said about the mental toughness on both sides of the football. But like Corey said, man, just a dominant win from a team that I certainly didn't expect it from at this point in the season. Now, what does that say about me as a fan? I don't know. Say whatever you want to in the live chat. But we try to keep it realistic with you guys. And every now and again, the Buccaneers do a good job of shutting us up. So I'm glad they were able to do that today.
Yeah. And it's always, it's not an easy road game, man. To go in there on the road on a short week and be a division opponent, it's a really impressive win. And it shows, like, again, it shows their mental toughness as a team. And you just hope that, it can hold up for a whole season. It's a long football season. It is a long football season. You're just hoping that, these performances that you're getting out of Baker Mayfield and that what you're getting out of, what you got out of Chris Godwin today and what you're getting out of the defense and Antoine Winfield and Christian Izzy, and like, you hope it can keep up. You'll also shout out to Chase McLaughlin, who again made a pretty long field goal, 51-yarder, like not a gimme by any means, hit the net too. Like, it would have been good from a long way. So in a big spot to put him up 2 scores again. So shout out to him, made yet another big kick. It does help that both of the big kicks both came indoors. that definitely helps. But yeah, it's been good. And 3-1 is 3-1. And no matter how it is, no matter who the opponents are, nobody can take that away from you. 3-1 and 3-1. You're at the top of the NFC South now, alone at the NFC South. You're not tied with anybody because Atlanta also lost. Carolina lost. So I mean, they're 0-4. The Carolina season's done. Like, 0-4, you're done. And then, like I said, Atlanta's been struggling now, and New Orleans has now dropped 2 straight. So the Buccaneers are the only team that hasn't, that started off 2-0 and hasn't dropped 2 straight in this division. So it was really nice to bounce back from a tough loss against Philly, where things could have unraveled. And I even talked about that on the preview. Like, they lost this game, things could have unraveled quickly for the Bucs with the upcoming schedule. You got Detroit, it's a tough game. Atlanta, it looking like it won't be as tough, but I mean, it's still a divisional game. You never know. And then Buffalo, Buffalo has beat Miami today. They had an impressive win. So they're looking like one of the top teams in the NFL again. So then the Houston Texans, like I talked about, that game is not going to be some gimme. Like, that game's not going to be easy. So it's important to build up these wins early on in the season. So maybe if you do falter a little bit, because it is still a young roster, it's still inexperienced, there's going to be injuries. If you falter a little bit, it won't hurt you in the end. So I just think it's really important, especially being 1-0 in the division now, your first divisional game. I think that's massive.
Yeah, 3-1 headed into the bye week is a damn good feeling, but 3-1 with a win over New Orleans is the icing on the cake. I mean, that just makes it that much better. So your final stat line, by the way, for player of the game, Antoine Winfield Jr., as we wrap up today's show, 9 tackles, a sack, 2 tackle for loss, a forced fumble and recovery, plus a pass defense. Best career game for Antoine Winfield Jr. And listen, I know more people are going to agree with me than you. but I stand firm on my position that through the first 4 weeks of football, there is not a better safety in the NFL than Antoine Winfield Jr.
That's a different statement. That is a different statement. Playing like the best safety in football and being the best safety in football is 2 different things. It's different.
You're trying to catch me on a technicality because you know you are incorrect either way.
No, I love Antoine Winfield. Like, I liked him before the draft. Like, I thought it was a home run pick, honestly. Like, and I think he's one of the best safeties in the NFL, and was not sure, he's the best. That's all. It's not like it's people always go to these extremes, right? If you don't say he's the best, then they automatically think, like, I just think he's terrible, right? And, like, no, it's not the case. Like, he's really, really, really good. Like, but there's other really, really good players. So there's no slight on him. If he keeps playing like this, like, he'll be the best safety in the NFL. I thought, like I said, today was his best career game. And this already includes a Minnesota game already this season where he was really good too. So it begs the question, how much more difficult does this make re-signing Mike Evans? Because there's no way you can let Antoine Winfield walk out that door. I mean, you can't.
Oh, so man.
And that's, we can maybe discuss that over the bye week. I mean, we'll have time now. We'll have a little bit of time to fill, because there's going to be, like, we can talk about this game for only so long before it's like, all right, like, let's move on to something else. So maybe we can preview the upcoming free agency class in like a shorter pod or something sometime over the bye week. But it could be difficult to keep all these guys. But I think Antoine Winfield has to be, all right. Am I crazy to think that Antoine Winfield should be their top priority in the offseason?
No. And I think there's other people that agree with you. I mean, when you look at Tristan Wirfs doesn't have to get paid for another year. Yeah. Mike Evans, Antoine Winfield
if Tristan
Jr.
Wirfs was up, I'd say Wirfs. But
Mike Evans, Antoine Winfield Jr., Baker Mayfield, rank them.
Antoine Winfield Jr., Mike Evans, Baker Mayfield. And then, like, I mean, we could throw in Levante David and Devin White in there too as like 2 others. I'd go Winfield, Evans, still Levante David, Devin White, Baker Mayfield probably. Because, like, the jury's still out on Mayfield. Like, the jury is still out. Like, we don't know exactly what you have. And I don't think you're going to know until you have a full body of work in front of you. So, like, there's still a world where, like, you're like, at the end of the year, you're like, oh, I don't know about Baker. Like, there is still a world because, like I said, he struggled with consistency in the NFL. So, like, for 4 games is great, but it's only 4 games. So if he can keep playing like this, sure, he'll absolutely, you can bring him back on a contract. But if not, you can move on. So that's where I would probably rank the priorities right now after 4 games.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of conversations to be had between now and the end of the regular season again, because the situation the Bucs are come late October, late November, that's obviously going to factor into how they decide to build that team moving forward. But Baker looking to stay consistent moving forward, as he is obviously playing with a contract. But the Bucs, they're going to have their hands full if these guys keep playing the way that they have so far this season. Antoine Winfield Jr. especially. But every week, I cannot gush enough over this guy right now. He looks like a generational talent at the safety position, and the Bucs are definitely happy to have him. But ladies and gentlemen, Evan did kind of open the can of worms on the Mike Evans conversation, but we're going to shove that can on. We're going to shove the lid back on that can, and we're going to save that conversation for later into the bye week, because that's going to do it for this week's post-game episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you to everybody who called in. Jeremy, our buddy Corey, getting me all hyped up, dude. Really appreciate you guys supporting the show. Subscribe if you have not already on YouTube for more great Tampa Bay Buccaneers content, just like this show today. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Brutal as Buck, Sue Wanish, our buddy Dub, Thump Life Fishing, G Vegas, Willie Beeman, part of the mod squad holding it down. I gotta find Bucks Nation in our live chat and make him a mod, because I don't know if he's a mod on our channel. I know he is in James' channel. I just don't know if he is on ours. Doodle, Buck Wild, Band Wagoner, and anyone else that I may have missed. We truly appreciate your guys' support as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 3-1 get ready for some extra rest. Words are hard. As they get ready for the bye week. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What have you got in the hopper this week?
Obviously, going to be doing the day after, which is just looking at reactions on Twitter from the Bucs game. Obviously, when they lose, it's much more somber, right? Much more like negative reactions. This will be a little bit more positive. So if you want a more positive reaction, stay tuned there. Obviously, there's going to be no Q&A this coming week because there's no game this coming weekend. So do not expect a Q&A from me or an X Factor, unfortunately, because there's nothing to talk about. But I might have an opinion piece or two out over the bye week. We will see. Maybe I'll write something about the Buccaneers free agents. Who knows?
Last but not least, you can find myself on Instagram and Twitter at Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. Speaking of which, I think our good buddy Corey just followed me on Instagram, so I will be sure to follow him back as soon as we wrap up this podcast. Thank you again, everybody listening and hanging out with us live today. We will talk to you later on in the week as we get more into depth about this Buccaneers roster and how they can get rested up and ready for the Detroit Lions in Week 6. The return of the Creamsicles right around the corner. Next time we see the Bucs, they will be donning that beautiful orange and white. I, for one, am very excited. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish. Thank you again for everybody hanging out with us today. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.